Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Juan's World. And I see in looking back over my past 300 videos that I've done a lot of cooking, but I haven't spent a lot of time talking about English cooking. A little bit, especially at Christmas time, because the Christmas season is good for English recipes. I've done pancakes for Pancake Day and so forth, but I haven't talked a lot about English cooking in general. And in the United States, people who pretend to know what they're talking about always just trash English cooking. Oh, it's all bland and simple and so forth. They're like, fish and chips are okay, but everything else is rubbish, which is just nonsense. Especially when you think about regional cooking in England. There's Cornish pasties. Like, Cornish pasties are wonderful. Devonshire cream, clotted cream, so that you can make a cream tea with scones and fresh jam and whipped cream or clotted cream. The cheeses of England are absolutely wonderful. I mean, everyone thinks about cheddar, and cheddar that you buy isn't made in cheddar in England. The actual cheddar from cheddar is also just marvelous, and so is Stilton, a French cheese shop that I used to go to in Katona in New York. The owner once said to me, Stilton, the queen of cheese. And he's French. You know, they've got Roquefort, Brie and Camembert and so forth, and he loves Stilton. Wensleydale, Double Gloucester, Blue Vinny. There are 400 named cheeses in England. And you can get most of them in good cheese shops in various parts of England. Regional sausages, Cumberland sausage, Oxford sausage. Most people won't like black sausage, which is basically blood sausage, but the English love it, I love it, and on and on and on. But here's the thing. The English are also very fond of organ meats. Which are also in the United States not very well represented. Some people will eat livers, particularly chicken livers, but they're not very common. And brains, sweetbreads, hearts, tripe, you can't even find them. You might be able to find them in the Hispanic end of town, especially tripe, and I love tripe. But today we want to talk about kidneys, and particularly steak and kidney. And here's the thing. Every Englishman that I know debates me, what do you prefer, steak and kidney pie or steak and kidney pudding? And it's an easy one. I like steak and kidney pudding better than steak and kidney pie, and so do most of my friends. It's just that it's a pain to make. But when I was a kid, I used to get home from school early, or earlier than my parents. I used to get home around 4 o'clock, and they wouldn't get back till 5 or 6. And I was hungry, so I used to pop a tin of steak and kidney pudding into boiling water for a few minutes, get it heated up, and that would be my first dinner. And then I'd have a second dinner with my parents. And I can make steak and kidney pudding, and I looked back through my old recipes here to see if I had done anything like it before, and I hadn't. I did do Norfolk pudding, so that you can see what a suet pudding looks like. So I guess that's sort of halfway there. It's steak and kidney pudding is basically like stewing beef and kidneys and some other ingredients in a suet crust and steamed for hours and hours and hours. Well, I didn't feel like doing that this time. But the thing is that it's very hard to get kidneys in Cambodia. And when I see them, and it's normally in a market that's a very long way away from where I live, when I don't go there very often. But once in a blue moon, they have kidneys. And when they do, I just buy the lot. I take them home and freeze them And then I make various things: steak and kidney pie, steak and kidney pudding, deviled kidneys, which is a great breakfast food. And I think I'm going to do deviled kidneys for next week's recipe, so you're warned. But this time I'm going to make steak and kidney pie. And the reason I'm going to make steak and kidney pie is because in another store that I go to once in a blue moon, owned by Australians, they had frozen puff pastry. And I got that because I thought, well, I make pies now and again, and making puff pastry is a pain in the neck. So if I can get it frozen, that's good. So here's steak and kidney pie. All right, now I'm not going to go through absolutely the whole process, but the important thing to understand is that you need to make the filling a day ahead for the pie. For pudding, it's 6 of 3, 6 and 2 threes, sorry, because the steamed steak and kidney pudding can be steamed for 3 hours or more, and so the steak gets a good chance to soften up. In a pie, no. In the pie, it's only going to be in the oven long enough to bake the pastry. So if it's really tough stewing steak, it's not going to be there long enough. So you have to make the filling ahead of time. And whilst we're talking about this, the other thing that you can do with the filling is you can make a cottage pie. That is, you can make the steak and kidney and whatever else you want to put into it ahead of time, put it in a dish, cover with mashed potatoes, just like with cottage pie, and bake. So it's the only difference with this and steak and kidney pie is that I'm using a puff pastry. So let's get started. We need, first of all, a sliced onion, and slowly browned to caramelize the onion, and then quickly sear the steak. Pour in a good rich beef stock and simmer and add your flavorings. Flavorings can be fairly simple, like just maybe some Worcestershire sauce, which I add, but I also like to add HP sauce, and for a long time I've liked to add a little bit of soy sauce. Adds a bit of flavor and some salt as well, and some oyster sauce. Not a lot, just enough to perk things up, plus some parsley, cracked black pepper, and then simmer and simmer and simmer and simmer until your beef is soft. And then what I did this time was I put that in the refrigerator overnight, and the next day I prepared the kidneys. Now kidneys take a lot of preparing, and I think next time when I do the deviled kidneys I'll show you exactly how to prepare them, because they're finicky. They've got some white tubules in the center, which is what they're actually functioning using, and you got to get those out, and that's a little tricky. And then you have to dry them off very well and put them in a hot skillet and sear them off, add them to the gravy, and just simmer that down with whatever else you feel like adding. And this time I added some shiitake mushrooms and some leeks. and then just let that all simmer down. Then with a slotted spoon, take the solids out of the broth and put them in your pie dish. You want to leave the most of the broth in the skillet. Now, some of the broth will get into the pan anyway, into your your baking dish. That's okay. It needs a little bit of moisture, but most of it will remain in your skillet. And so, when you've put all your solids into your baking dish, cover with pastry and bake at very high heat for about 25-30 minutes. And meanwhile, take your broth and add whatever you want. Could be, in this case, I added some Chinese mushrooms and some leeks, and a thickener. And I used arrowroot as my thickener. I've used arrowroot as a thickener when I can get it over flour, because flour just gets lumpy sometimes. Arrowroot never gets lumpy. And I don't like cornstarch because it makes a rather clear gravy, which I also, it's okay, but I don't really like it. Now, I also, as it happens, decided that I wanted some vegetables apart from the gravy, and so before I put the pie in the oven, I preheated it, and I added some potatoes, some carrots, and some leeks into the baking tray at the bottom, and got them going for about 40 minutes before I added the pie, so that they had a chance to pre-cook, because they take about an hour. They're wonderful roasted. Carrots are wonderful roasted. Leeks are wonderful roasted. The carrots are very, very sweet. And you can roast anything you want. And if I'm going to heat up my apartment with baking, then I'm going to use that heat as much as I possibly can. So here's the finished pie. Looks beautiful. Plate it up with vegetables and gravy, and it was a wonderful meal. Strange meal for a Monday. It's normally the kind of thing that I would reserve for Sundays. But I live alone, and one day is as good as another, and so sometimes on Sundays I'll just have a ham sandwich for lunch, and sometimes I'll have a roast duck. When I was growing up, we would always have a really nice roast of lamb in Australia, or in England could be beef. And there's another thing, roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. That's as English as it can get. I will be extolling English cooking more in future weeks. So meanwhile, have a good week. Please tell your friends about my videos. Please like, please subscribe, and I will be back on Friday with some musings about something or other. Right now I have no idea. Be well.